Now, are we raising Generation Snowflake? Recent controversies on university campuses in this country, even more so in the United States, have given rise to accusations that students these days are willing to take offence at even the most minor slight. This year, the University of Oxford's Oriel College found itself at the centre of a broader cultural debate when students there complained about a statue of the imperialist Cecil Rhodes, one of the college's benefactors. They argue that Mr. Rhodes was a racist, a colonialist, and should no longer be honoured by the college. Let's take a look at some of the protests by the Rhodes Must Fall campaign.
Rhodes must fall! Take it down! Rhodes must fall! Take it down! Rhodes' actions in Southern Africa were informed by this philosophy, and in putting his murderous colonial project into practice, he committed a multitude of crimes that deserve international outrage instead of tacit complicity like we are seeing here at Oriel College.
Now, our guest of the day, Claire Fox, has written a book called I Find That Offensive, arguing that younger generations in particular have become too thin-skinned. Well, joining her to discuss the issue is the writer and campaigner Caroline Criado-Perez. Welcome to the programme. Claire Fox, let me come to you first. Should there be almost no limits on the ability to give offence? Is that a democratic right to be offensive?
Yes. I mean, I'm a free speech absolutist, but what I tried to understand in the book was just why there was this generational fragility, and that actually I don't think it's a kind of posture. I think that young people genuinely, as a generational phenomena, are finding it harder to cope with challenging, difficult, so there's an immediate instinct to ban or to silence or to close down. And I wanted to, and to be hurt, to be genuinely hurt, and to kind of, I found that when I was doing speeches, that instead of the young, which I anticipated, feistily fighting back and arguing with me, because I certainly wasn't expecting, that they'd be going, oh, you can't say that, getting upset and so on. So I wanted to understand that. That's what I've tried to explore.
What do you say to that? Because you've been on the receiving end of some very offensive tweets. Can you just brush it off, or does it get to you?
Well, it certainly gets to you, but I would question the use of the word offensive. I think that when you're talking about offence, I agree there's a right to be offensive, 100%, and I don't think that we can legislate against offence, because who decides what's offensive? And I think what we've seen with universities is that once you start allowing offensive speech to be banned, you know, it just is a cycle.
Germaine Greer and all the rest of it, yeah.
For me, I think that there's a line of, if you are sending someone threats to their life, threats to their bodily integrity, which is what I was getting.
That's illegal.
I don't call that offensive. No. Like, I wasn't offended. I was terrified.
Yeah, so I don't blame you.
So I think that is a difference.
I assume you would agree with that.
Well,
no?
My only hesitation in relation to this is because, say, for example, the recent campaign that's been launched, you know, Jess Phillips MP and various people around the internet and that reclaim the internet and so on. The reason I get a bit nervous is because suddenly what just gets described as trolling is a very broad category, and it's getting ever more expansive. There's a kind of concept creep that suddenly it goes from death threats to abuse. Often the abuse, by the way, is disagreement. I mean, I had an article in the newspaper yesterday, and, you know, it was one of those Twitter storms. And the thing was, people said that I broke the rules of the sisterhood by saying something about young women being particularly thin-skinned at the moment, which I'm very concerned about. Twitter went mad, right? But the thing that was interesting was they were accusing me of being the abusive person who was trolling and so on. And then suddenly I'm on the receiving end of this kind of vicious...
Well, let's come... Can we agree that death threats are beyond abuse? The death threat should be reported to the police if appropriate.
Things are illegal, but the only reason I'm saying that...
violence, threatening violence.
Yes. But I completely agree with Claire that the term trolling has become far too broad, and I think it does a disservice to the people who are trying to fight against the way that women are, high-profile women are sent.
What do you say, though, to Claire's point that your generation has become too thin-skinned? Put aside the death threats and the violence, we understand that. But on the general, I don't like this argument, you shouldn't even make it kind of line. I
don't agree with that way of dealing with opinions that you disagree with. I slightly differ from Claire in that I think I understand the impetus in that I disagree. I think you would say that you would go by the line, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I disagree that words can't hurt you. But I also disagree that the way of dealing with the psychological damage that words can do is to stop them being said, because ultimately what you want is to, for example, if you're fighting against misogyny, you want people to not be misogynistic rather than just ban them from saying it, because all that does is it drives it underground. And the views aren't challenged. And I think it's really important to air these views so that you can challenge them.
Why do you think this is a problem? And I think this is what you say in the book, particularly for young women.
Well, I think that because part of the reason for this is a kind of encouragement of identity politics and victim politics, and a certain brand of feminism has got... I mean, you know, the way that you kind of gain most sympathy these days is to be a victim. And so there's a competition to be the most victim, and young women are sadly encouraged to do that on a range of things. And so you know, you can see why in the recent Higher Education Policy Institute report on censorship on free speech on campus, they've actually said, well, there's increasing numbers of young people now who say there should be no platform and safe space, and the majority of those are women. There's more women saying it. So that, I mean, I'm a fighter for women's liberation and for women being strong, so it scares the hell out of me if they're becoming like that.
When I was at university, I mean, I think it probably must have been at least 20 years ago now, maybe longer. When I was at university, universities were really famous for being the places where you could say anything. You know, that's what we valued about being a... We also had the time to do it as well. Whereas it seems now the universities are the places where, with the Safe Space campaign, that what you can say is being curtailed. Is that just an impression, or is that what's happening?
No, I think that's absolutely what's happening. I think Claire's point about the victimhood is really interesting, because it's almost like it comes out of this censorship movement, that people are aware that unless you can be, you know, the top victim, you're not going to be allowed to speak because you're too privileged to be able to speak. Yeah. And so it's almost like a vicious circle, and ultimately no one's going to end up being allowed to speak. I mean, that's the danger, and I think that is what people aren't seeing. And it is interesting that more people who had been advocating it then get banned themselves and suddenly realise they're on the wrong side of it.
I've just remembered a phrase that was popular when I was at university, which was a complaint of the university authority. It was called repressive tolerance. That the authorities were so tolerant that they were really repressing us by being so tolerant of allowing us to say whatever we wanted.
Yes, there's no chance of that now. I think just one thing to note, because there is always a danger if you bring a book that's basically trying to describe Generation Snowflake and explain what's going on, that you're kind of like middle-aged woman, you know, whinges about young people, right? I just want to point out, because...
That's what middle-aged women are there for.
Yeah, exactly, and I get it, right? But I'd just like to point out that actually, and I'm delighted, the people who've most enjoyed the book, that I've had most support from the book, are under 27 or something, right?
Are you able to go to universities and debate this?
Yeah, and I am doing. But the people who don't like it are often the kind of well-meaning PCs, social workers, teachers and so on, who think we should protect the young. So there you go.
I don't like you talking about me like that. I have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.